Forest City was designed to house 700,000 people on 4 artificial islands in the Strait of Johor. That is roughly the population of Seattle, built from scratch on land that did not exist, sitting 2 kilometers from the Singapore skyline. By the time the first towers opened, almost no one had moved in. The question is not whether the engineering worked. It is why a city built from nothing stayed empty, and what that gap reveals about the distance between what can be constructed and what will actually be occupied. In 2014, Chinese developer Country Garden announced a joint venture with the Johor state government to build an entirely new city on reclaimed land off the southern coast of Malaysia. The location was deliberate. The site placed Forest City close enough to Singapore to benefit from its financial gravity, its infrastructure connections, and its chronic housing pressure, while operating entirely within Malaysian jurisdiction, where land and labor costs were dramatically lower. The pitch was explicit: create a financial hub and residential enclave positioned for Chinese investors seeking offshore property, with the lure of eventual Malaysian residency for buyers who met investment thresholds. The Reclamation plan called for dredging sand from the seabed and forming 4 islands across 1,400 hectares. Country Garden committed to delivering residential towers, offices, hotels, schools, and a marina. Forest City would be a vertical garden city, with greenery planted on building facades and rooftop terraces to soften the density. The developer positioned the project as environmentally progressive. The irony of branding a sand dredge development as a forest was not lost on critics, but the marketing was compelling, and the renderings were striking. Land reclamation in the Strait of Johor presented a specific engineering constraint. The seabed beneath the site is soft marine clay, a material that compresses and shifts under load. Conventional shallow foundations would sink unevenly as towers rose. Country Garden's engineers chose deep piling as the solution, driving reinforced concrete shafts dozens of meters down through the soft clay to reach stable bedrock beneath. Each high-rise required hundreds of individual piles, and the reclaimed island itself had to be allowed to settle and consolidate for months before vertical construction could begin. That waiting period was not optional. Rush it, and the foundations would move. The engineering worked. The first island stabilized on schedule. Piles found bedrock, towers went up. By any structural measure, the construction phase was a success. What came next was not an engineering problem. By 2016, showrooms opened and sales events drew thousands of prospective buyers from mainland China. Country Garden reported strong pre-sales, with units marketed at prices well below comparable properties in Singapore. The financing model was straightforward. Use early sales revenue to fund later phases, the same approach used in large-scale developments worldwide. The Malaysian government saw infrastructure investment and job creation flowing into Johor. Singapore observed a potential overflow valve for its own strained housing market. Early press coverage framed Forest City as bold, ambitious, perhaps hubristic, but fundamentally viable. The numbers looked right. The timing looked right. Then the politics shifted, and they shifted fast. In 2018, Malaysia elected a new government under Mahathir Mohamad, who had long expressed skepticism about foreign-led megaprojects and foreign ownership of Malaysian land. During the campaign, he singled out Forest City specifically, warning that it risked becoming a separate enclave rather than an integrated part of Malaysia. After taking office, his administration announced that foreign buyers would no longer be eligible for the long-term residency visas that had been tied to Forest City property purchases. That visa pathway had been a central selling point. It was now gone. Simultaneously, China tightened its capital controls, making it significantly harder for Chinese nationals to move money overseas for property investment. Both policy changes landed within the same narrow window. Demand collapsed. Country Garden's pre-sales pipeline dried up. Construction continued on committed phases because stopping would have been more expensive than finishing. But the pace slowed and new commitments stalled. By 2019, thousands of units had been delivered. Occupancy remained in the single digits. Entire furnished towers stood empty. The engineering had produced exactly what was promised. The people had not arrived. This is the structural irony of Forest City. The physical problem, building stable towers on artificial islands over soft marine clay, had a known solution. Engineers have been stabilizing reclaimed land for decades. Pile depth, consolidation timelines, and foundation loads are calculable. The developers solved that problem correctly. What they could not solve was predicting regulatory appetite and cross-border capital policy over a multi-decade investment horizon. Those variables were outside the engineering model entirely. Country Garden did not abandon the project. It recalibrated. Marketing shifted toward domestic Malaysian buyers. The pitch repositioned Forest City as a long-term industrial and logistics hub rather than a residential enclave for Chinese investors. The proximity to Singapore was reframed as a supply chain advantage rather than a lifestyle selling point. Forest City now operates as a special financial zone, with tax incentives structured to attract technology firms and manufacturing operations. Some companies have opened regional offices there, drawn by below-market rents and direct access to Singapore's port infrastructure. A small population of residents lives in the towers today. Some are retirees. Some are investors waiting for the market to recover. Schools operate at partial capacity. Retail units remain vacant at street level. The marina has boats, but not the volume the original projections assumed. The infrastructure that was built for 700,000 people serves a fraction of that number, and the costs of maintaining that infrastructure do not scale down proportionally just because the population does. Critics describe Forest City as a cautionary example of megaproject over-ambition, where a developer and a state government bet billions on assumptions they did not control. Supporters counter that large infrastructure projects require decades to mature, and that dismissing Forest City after a few slow years ignores the possibility of a longer arc. Both positions have merit. Neither changes the immediate fact: the city is real and the population is not. What Forest City demonstrates with unusual clarity is that construction and habitation are two different problems. The first is bounded and solvable. You define the load, you find the bedrock, you drive the piles, you build the towers. The second is unbounded. It depends on policy decisions made in two capitals, on capital controls set by a central bank, on the sentiment of buyers who have other options, and on the patience of a developer whose financial model assumed a timeline that the market refused to honor. The islands are stable. The towers are structurally sound. The infrastructure is live. But the megacity promised in the original renderings exists today only as potential. Whether that potential converts into population depends entirely on variables the engineers never touched: policy continuity, investor confidence, and time. The physical city was built. The question that remains open is whether it will ever be inhabited at the scale for which it was designed. That gap between engineering capacity and political reality is not unique to Forest City. It appears in artificial island projects from the Gulf to the South China Sea, wherever scale has outrun the demand that was supposed to follow. The lesson is not about dredging technique or pile depth or reclamation schedules. It is about the assumption, embedded in every megaproject, that if you build it on the right timeline with the right incentives, the people will come. Forest City tested that assumption and found its limit. Visual reconstructions in this episode are illustrative. Facts and interpretations are based on the sources listed in the description. Visual reconstructions are illustrative. Facts and interpretations are based on the sources listed in the description.